You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand.
Okay. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm Christine Nicholas. I am the chair of the New York State Tourism Advisory Council, and I'd like to call this meeting to order. It is now 11:02 a.m. And just a reminder for those conferencing in, please place yourselves on mute to eliminate any background noise during the meeting. And if you'd like to say something, feel free to unmute yourself and speak. So first, we will take attendance for those joining via video conference, and I'll call the names from the RSVP list that I have here. Let's see, from the Zoom-ins, right? We've got, well, I can see who we have. Okay. We have Dave Filipiak. Yep.
Here.
Hello, hello. And we have Dan Fuller.
Good morning. I'm here.
Morning. Good morning. We have let's see, Kelly. Hi, Kelly.
Hi, I'm here.
Yes, great. We have Michael Oates, I believe. There we are.
Morning.
Hi, Michael. I
Hi,
was thrown by your background. It's beautiful. There we go.
Hudson Valley.
Hudson Valley right there.
Right.
Okay, Somer Bedford representing Senator Serrano. How are you? Good to see you. Okay, and do we have someone representing Assemblymember Ron Kim? I believe they RSVP'd, so they probably will join us, as will George and Tim and Barbara Lee Diamondstein Spielvogel.
George is on.
Hi, George. He may not have his camera on.
No, I don't.
Okay. It says we have 10 people, but I'm only seeing 5.
Well, some of them are hosts.
I see.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I think we captured it.
All right, we captured. Okay.
George, are you there, George? We can't hear you if you are.
Yes, I am.
There you are. Welcome.
All right,
Thank you.
George. Go back on mute if you're driving. Risk his life. He sounded like he was like driving.
Right.
All right. Okay. So now we will take attendance for the TAC members in person. Christine Nicholas.
Olga Lucerado.
Eleanor Tatum.
Okay.
If you want to go around the rest
And
of the
we're
room.
happy to go around the rest of the room.
Yeah, I'm Ross Levi, Executive Director of New York State Division of Tourism.
I'm Rhiannon Edlin, Manager of Tourism Policy Programs at the New York State Division of Tourism.
Hi, Sarah Emmerich, Senior Director of Tourism Policy and Operations with the Division of Tourism.
Rich Gagliano, SVP Marketing at ESD.
David Gutierrez-Turley, Director of Industry Relations, New York State Division of Tourism.
Randy.
And Randy Borscheit, Cultural Guide in the Hudson Valley.
Excellent. Well, welcome. All the members have been emailed a copy of the minutes. They're also available on the ESD website. Are there any changes proposed to the minutes? Okay, hearing none, I need a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll move them, Christine.
Okay, thank you, Dan. And a second, please.
That'll be me, David.
Eleanor Tatum is our
Eleanor.
second. Okay, if there is no changes, all in favor? Aye. Okay. None opposed? None opposed, motion carries, minutes are approved. As always, I'm going to start the chair report by sharing some of the recent tourism-related announcements made by Governor Hochul. The Storm King reopening. Earlier this month, Governor Hochul announced the reopening of Storm King Art Center with a $53 million upgrade, including pavilions and accessible amenities, a conservation, fabrication, and maintenance building, and a holistic approach to the landscape stewardship and sustainability. The project was supported by more than $11 million in NYSCA, ESD, and NYSERDA grants. And there are some beautiful photos, and we actually took a tour of that. We had a TAC meeting earlier, right?
Yes, but that was before the improvements. So I'm interested in seeing that because that on the left you see here is actually the new welcome experience.
Wow.
And so it's really nice because in the past you kind of pulled into a dirt lot and there you were.
Yeah.
And Storm King's impressive, but now the idea of having a real welcome experience and a sense of place upon arrival, I'm very excited to see it in person, but it's looking good so far.
I've never been inside anywhere.
Oh, yeah.
No.
Has John Stern been replaced? The director?
Don't know.
Well, we should try to head back up there at some point,
Yeah.
so. All right, so last week, a new multi-use path opened in the town of Wheatfield in Niagara County, closing one of the last remaining gaps in the scenic Niagara River Shoreline Trail. This will make it easier to explore the region's natural treasures by bike or on foot. The $4.3 million Niagara River Shoreline Trail project provides walkers and cyclists with a protected pathway that runs through the forested former railroad property and connects to existing trail sections in North Tonawanda and Niagara Falls. The New York State Department of Transportation provided $2.5 million to help fund the creation of this new trail segment. Okay. The Utica Children's Museum, okay, you were able to keep up with me, good job. Okay. Just checking, making sure you
Keep us on our
listening.
toes.
The construction was also recently completed with an $8 million Utica Children's Museum supported by capital grants from Market New York and NYSCA. The 14,000 square foot museum features exhibits designed as exciting play-based experiences that reflect the community and showcase its diversity, industries, and many other features that are a source of pride for the Mohawk Valley residents. Very pretty. Nice, okay. Highmark Stadium update. I'm sure you've all heard about this. In April, the governor celebrated the topping off of the Buffalo Bills' new $2.1 billion Highmark Stadium. A major building milestone topping out celebrates the lifting and placing of the last major roof module for the stadium structure. Over 1,400 guests and hundreds of union construction workers watched the final beam lifted into place at the new state-of-the-art stadium that will keep the Bills in Buffalo for up to 30 years. The project is about 50% complete and is slated to be finished prior to the 2026 NFL season. Unplug and play, encouraging New Yorkers to visit state campgrounds. Governor Hochul also announced that New York State campgrounds are taking reservations for the 2025 season. Reservations for campsites, cabins, and cottages can be made up to 9 months in advance of the planned arrival date. New York State's 119 campgrounds offers affordable and accessible options for visitors to get offline and enjoy the outdoors. In 2025, New York Camping Guide is online at the state parks website and in print at state campgrounds and at state parks and DEC regional offices.
And I will mention some of the more popular campgrounds and campsites go fast. Some it's like a concert or Disney World.
They're
So
waiting
there are
online?
people that are
Soon
waiting
as they go on
9
sale,
months
they're
ahead
gone.
of time. Now that's not all of
Well,
them.
they
There's
want to make
plenty.
sure they get their spot.
That's right.
Yeah.
There are plenty of places to camp, but I do encourage folks, if you're thinking of camping, it is not too soon.
Good to know. Okay. Agritourism announcements. Long Island Seafood Trail. This spring also welcomes some important agritourism announcements. The Long Island Seafood Cuisine Trail officially launched in March with a ribbon cutting at the Snapper Inn in Oakdale. The South Shore Trail runs from Bay Shore to Montauk and is intended to drive business and tourism to locations proudly serving and selling locally raised and wild-caught, sustainably harvested fish and shellfish. The North Shore Trail, which will run from Oyster Bay to Greenport, is under development and slated to launch in the coming months. 2025 Maple Weekends. Also back in March, Governor Hochul issued a proclamation declaring that the last 2 weekends in March as New York State's 2025 Maple Weekends, and highlighted that New York State continues to rank second in the nation in maple production. Each March, maple farms across the state open their doors for a chance to taste pure maple syrup right from the source and experience the unique tradition of maple syruping. From tours to pancake breakfast, agritourism events like Maple Weekends and Maple Month continue to be an important part of tourism in New York State. If you go along the Catskills, I noticed there are like these buckets, and you just wonder, what are those buckets doing next to the trees? And then there are tubes coming out of it. That's what mapling is. They just kind of stab a spear in there, and it kind of sucks the maple right out. It's amazing.
Going through those blue hoses.
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
and go right to the buckets.
It's called tapping, isn't it?
Tapping,
Yes.
very good. See, or tack point on tapping. Inaugural Craft Beer Day, April 11th, was announced as the inaugural New York Craft Beer Day in New York State. New York is the second largest craft beer market in the U.S. and has more than 500 independent craft breweries. Created by the New York State Brewers Association, the free official New York State craft beer app can be downloaded by patrons and is the only app that offers a map of every brewery in the state. Okay, this is 2 in a row, by the way, the maple syrup and the craft beer that were second. All right, we have to step this up now. Like, come on.
We're first in yogurt.
In yogurt, okay, good.
Try harder, number 2.
We have to try harder, like we're Avis. Okay, we're going to try harder. For transportation announcements, there's recently been some important announcements that will specifically support tourism. For example, in March, the governor unveiled a $160 million proposal to create faster, more frequent, and more reliable service on the Q70 LaGuardia Link bus that connects the airport with the subway to the Long Island Railroad. This is incredibly important for people that want to connect and not use cars and reduce their carbon footprint. The new funding will advance several transportation projects, provide new bus lanes, reduce congestion and overcrowding, and install new traffic lights to prioritize buses into the airport. Sullivan County Airport upgrade. This is to modernize and give a state-of-the-art gateway. It is in its final stages and on track for completion this spring. The new 15,000 square foot energy-efficient terminal facility will help fuel economic growth and tourism in the Catskills. And the cruise terminal on Buffalo's Outer Harbor RFP request. We're moving forward with plans to bring the Great Lakes cruises to Buffalo. The governor announced that a RFP was issued by Erie Canal Harbor Development Corporation to design, develop, and create a new cruise terminal to support Great Lakes cruises operations at Slip 2 on the Outer Harbor. The project aims to reimagine the current site for cruise ship docking for both domestic and international travel based on expressed interest by cruise companies. It is expected that Buffalo could serve as a port as early as 2027.
So that can be very significant. So that's not only people that are taking Great Lakes cruises to make Buffalo one of those stops, but particularly for cruises that start or stop there, that also means people that are coming in early and staying in a hotel before they get on the cruise. So we're keeping a careful eye on this. It could really be an important tourism development.
Excellent. In addition to the governor's announcements, I wanted to highlight that the 2025-26 state budget recently passed and funding for tourism was kept level year over year. This maintains a historically high investment in New York State's tourism economy. So on behalf of the tourism industry, I'd like to thank the governor and the legislature for their continued bipartisan support for tourism, recognizing how much the industry contributes to the state's fiscal health. I'd also like to thank the legislature and governor for including $5 million to support America 250th Commemoration Commission. As a member, I will be part of the conversations determining how the commission will utilize those funds, so stay tuned. And that concludes my report. We're going to, at the end of the meeting, be able to talk a little bit more about the commission as we have a meeting coming up, and I'd love to get your feedback and suggestions. So with this, I'm going to turn it over to Ross and Rich for an I Love New York update.
Great. Thank you, Christine. Good to see everybody as always. Happy spring. So obviously we are at an unsettled time for tourism. It's not the same old by any means. We are facing new headwinds that weren't there in the last couple of years, from economic factors like currency exchange and fears of inflation to, of course, political factors as well. This is particularly true for international travel, which we know represents a significant portion of visitor spending, and especially true for Canada, which is our #1 inbound market. It's really kind of early to know from the hard data where things are headed. On one hand, we know that bridge crossings from Canada to New York State and inbound air travel were down compared to the prior year. And anecdotally, we have heard of some international visitors canceling trips. On the other hand, hotel demand has at least remained level across the state and may have even gone up slightly. And international tour operators tell us they are still receiving inquiries about New York State trips. You'll hear about my trade mission, and I heard this directly from travel agents and tour operators there. But we obviously are keeping a careful eye on developments. As we do that, I Love New York's motto is kind of stay calm and carry on. We continue to spread the message that New York State enthusiastically welcomes visitors from around the world and remains a destination with something for everyone to love. And those tactics that we're doing, range from advertising running in Canada and the US, that Rich will be talking about shortly, to out-of-home and digital consumer advertising being launched in the UK and Australia, to our work with the international travel trade. So our foot isn't off the gas pedal. No matter what the environment, we're going to be out there making the invitation. But obviously, as things change, we will adapt. And so we'll keep you posted, obviously, as we move along. But giving some concrete examples of that trade work we're doing internationally. From April 27th to May 8th, I Love New York held a combination UK and Germany sales mission that included sales training for top product managers, network events, and special evening trade and consumer receptions and events. Heather McElhenney, who heads up our trade work, led the UK portion of the mission in London, and then with 3 New York partners. And then I took over in Dublin, Ireland, and continued for the Germany portions with 3 additional New York State partners. That picture you see up there on the left, that is in front of Cassidy Travel in Dublin, Ireland. And they didn't do this for us, although we did have a meeting there. But you could see there is a trip to New York City on the top, USA, and then you see other things, New Orleans. But then you see New York State. That is only New York State. That's a specific New York State. I mean, it includes New York. That's why we're out there. That's what we're doing. We're talking to tour operators. We're talking to travel agents so that they can talk to customers and say, hey, in addition to New York City, there's this great stuff for you to see all across New York State. So we met with them and a number of other travel agencies selling trip to New York State. We held events for tour operators and travel agents and airlines and customers. We did hear some concerns related to travel sentiment, as I was just mentioning. But we also heard about continued interest and enthusiasm for trips to New York State, particularly with the idea of customers wanting to do something different. There is some sense of hearing of like, we've done the cities, we're looking for something else. Cassidy Travel, for example, in Dublin, they sort of specialize in, the hidden gems, the new and the different. So New York State is really perfect for their customers. I also want to mention before I headed to overseas, I was invited to speak at a reverse sales mission and business expo held by New York City Tourism and Conventions at Planet Hollywood for 26 top Canadian and U.S. trade professionals, along with 40 tourism suppliers from New York City. So that was great that they allowed me to start and give a brief message to open that trade mission, or reverse sales mission, and help set a positive tone and promote visitation to all of New York State, in addition to exploring New York City, including all the boroughs. So I got to go to Planet Hollywood here in New York City, then off to the airport, to Dublin, 3 cities in Germany, and back, I think it was a week. So 4 hotels in a week. So when you wake up and you don't remember where the bathroom is, you know you're doing good work. You're getting a lot done. We also continue to activate at key trade shows. At the end of the month, I Love New York will once again be attending ATTA's Adventure Elevate in Denver. This annual trade show aims to promote sustainable and experiential adventure travel across North America. The ATTA marketplace is for inbound tour operators to meet with destinations and suppliers with strong outdoor and adventure products for pre-scheduled one-on-one appointments. Our very own Sarah Emmert will be attending on behalf of I Love New York to conduct these meetings. She's been overseeing a lot of our outdoor recreation work, particularly some of the new work funded through our EDA grant. So it'll be great that Sarah has the opportunity to be there. Then, of course, it's IPW. Danae Jones-Persip, Markley Wilson, myself, maybe Rich, will be attending the IPW trade show in Chicago in June, hosting our delegation of 11 local and regional reps for hundreds of meetings. Yes, literally hundreds, because we have 8 tables. So there's 8 meetings per spot. I think there's 20 meetings per day. So like it's hundreds, right? And that will be in our sort of I Love New York mega booth, which is just part of the larger branded New York State aisle. In addition to us, there are other partners from New York State, Niagara Falls, Buffalo, Corning Museum, lots of others. So we really have a whole aisle. You can see last year's up there on the right. I will also be taking appointments at Media Marketplace along with our rep from MMGY, so I'll be able to meet with dozens of travel writers over a whole day, one after the other. Then we'll host a New York State reception at Second City, Chicago, with a networking reception and a private show just for us, for our invited international guests and statewide partners. Sort of the gimmick is the second city invites you to think about the first city.
Yeah.
Comedy? It's gonna be
It's
like
the
a
comedy show. It's the improv show, yeah.
Ross, I've got a question.
Yeah.
How do we?
Oh, push the button
The
down.
black button, yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
black one. Okay. So with these trade shows, so I Love New York gets the main booth, and then is it kind of like co-op space that the rest of it is?
Both. So the way it works is we, at IPW, for example, we have actually 8 booths, and we call it the I Love New York booth. And yes, we have partners. We have 11 partners from around the state that are buying to be part of our booth. In addition to that, there are destinations that are buying their own booths directly with IPW, not with us, but requesting to be a part of an aisle. So it's for some it's co-ops,
Okay.
for some they're doing their own activation, but we're branded together. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and is there a reason why they choose not to be part of your booth, or? Is it
Yeah, I
just-
think it sometimes can be their identity, like and sometimes it could be they want to do appointments just for them. They don't want to talk, like, Corning Museum wants to just talk about the museum, so they have one-on-one meetings, where our meetings tend to be a delegation, right? Tends to be 4 or 5 people from different parts of the state, so.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. No, and it's different show to show. There are some shows where it's only co-op. There's some shows that we just support and like do a sponsorship and we don't have a booth at all. There are other partners, so it's different show to show. But IPW is kind of that combination model.
But overall, like how many, just to piggyback
Yeah.
on Eleanor's question, how many New York State presenters are there?
At IPW, a ton, because if you include New York City, which has 50 or 60 alone,
Okay.
and then we have probably another 20 or so from upstate. So there's probably 100 reps for all of New York State, including New York City at IPW.
And they're all
Relatively
geographically
nearby. New York
Okay.
City has its own section. Like our branded section is for New York State. Other than New York City, on this side of that aisle you see running here,
New York
kind of
City.
begins the New York City.
And
area.
those that are within the I Love New York, in your area, are those subsidized a bit?
Oh, very much. Yeah, yeah. Their cost to buy into our activation is, I think, a third. And not to mention, I don't remember if Heather was here, she could tell you. I think you also have to have like membership in USTA, which is your yearly dues for the U.S. Travel Association, because they run this. So yes, I mean, that is one of the reasons people do the co-op with us, is because they can afford their own booth
And-
otherwise.
And do you have people that aren't able to get into it because you guys have too much of a, too many people want to come into it?
Not yet.
No, okay.
Right now, we had just enough to fill the spots. We didn't turn anyone. As a matter of fact, the way we do it is the first right of entry goes to the TPAs, so the county and regional
Okay.
tourism offices. If they don't fill all the space, we then open it up to attractions. And we do sometimes, like in the past, we've had like the Wild Center. We've also had the dynamic where people will start with us and be with us for a few years, and then they'll go and do their own booth, which we don't think is a bad thing. Like, that's great.
Right.
They sort of, we sort of allow them to have their first steps, get the experience, see what it's like, sell it to their stakeholders, and then they're able to sort of fly on their own and do their own.
It's the same model we use on the economic development side. We're going to a semiconductor trade show or a life science trade show. The same thing. We'll get a footprint and we try to work with the industry team that year to understand the demand. So if we know it's an event that's going to have a larger demand from our partners, we buy a bigger footprint to try to accommodate that. If there's lesser demand, it's a smaller. And to Ross's point, it's the same thing. Some we sponsor, some we have a little booth, some we have a large platform or pavilion where our partners kind of come in, and it makes it more affordable and available to someone who wants to be part of a bigger trade show but can't afford the footprint or is not a member. They still have a presence there, and if you have a big enough presence where you can go on your own, they're free to do that.
That's what I was hoping to hear. So, okay, thank you.
Yeah. The last piece of our trade work I wanted to mention was we're working to support our tourism partners across the state in their work to attract visitors with a series of travel trade webinars. So in February, we hosted the first of 2 educational webinars to help the craft beverage industry expand into the travel trade market, working alongside our ESD colleague and craft beverage industry head, Stephen Fleming. He's kind of the one-stop shop here at ESD for folks in craft beverage and wineries. He's actually coming to IPW this year, too, to act as a liaison to the craft beverage industry and tour operators. But that first webinar we held was sort of a Tourism 101 session and discussed topics such as what is tourism? Because some of these craft beverage folks, they've gone into business because they like making beer and they want to sell beer. And the idea of just letting them know, well, you can have visitors too, and how do you capitalize on opportunities? Part 2 was held just last week and was a deeper dive where we discussed pricing and sales materials, in addition to more detailed action members of the industry can take. Because, if it's not as simple as just saying, come visit our craft brewery. There's the question of, well, do you want to have groups? What about international visitors? How do you sell ahead of time? It's all the work we do. So it's a real good education process. The next step will be informal office hours for craft beverage businesses to ask questions about spurring and facilitating visitation. And then in addition to our key ongoing international markets of Canada, UK, Germany, and Australia, which you always hear us talk about, I Love New York is engaging with some emerging markets like Latin America and India and Scandinavia, not on the same level, but trying to do sort of opportunities to at least dip our toe and support our partners who work in those areas. So back in March, for example, we hosted 3 webinars for the industry to learn more about the value of these new international markets. And over 20 destinations attended, and we plan to host part 2 sessions for all 3 of those markets to discuss international strategy. So that's our trade work. I will have more to talk about, but we want to, from here, move on into consumer advertising. And here's Rich with that.
Thanks, Ross. Ross mentioned earlier, we're keeping an eye on Canada international marketing. It's still, a lot of the true data takes almost a year to come into play. So we're keeping an eye on things, but we're not taking our foot off the gas. We're sticking to a strategy that we know has worked in the past by promoting specific attractions, regions across the state, different target audiences, seasonal messages. That's not changing. We're still investing in Canada. Again, Canada has not dropped off to 0, not even close to that. So those who are still looking to visit New York, we want to keep getting our message out in front of them, as well as all of our international partners, international visitors, I should say. Before we get into some of our summer plans, just wanted to quickly recap spring. It's crazy to believe that spring is already over in the general terms, right? My Memorial Day is summer, even though it's not official, but spring is, the spring campaign just wrapped up earlier this month on May 5th. And it's the second year, I was talking to Anna about this, it feels like it's been a lot longer, but this is only our second year of the Blooms Report, which launched last year, to rousing success. This year, we actually got 1 million more visitors than last year, which was a 33% increase in clicks from last year's spring campaign. So it's a good, we're happy to continue to promote that. It's a good sort of partner to our fall leaf report. And it's just another way to promote the spring season before we get into full gear with summer. Maybe jump to the next slide. So the summer campaign, as we prepare for that to launch post Memorial Day, the spots are not quite ready yet to show. But just to give a little preview of what we'd be doing, like I said before, our strategy is remaining the same, where we feature the most visually appealing, wide-ranging attractions that state has to offer, to use as examples of all the different things that you can do in the summer in New York State. But a slight evolution from what we've done in the past, our tagline for the past few years since COVID has been easy to love. And that line came out of research that we did during COVID that aligned itself with what people were looking for coming out of the pandemic. People wanted safety, affordability, easy to book. People wanted to travel, but they didn't know what the world was kind of bringing post-COVID. Now that we're 3+ years post-COVID, it made sense to sort of look at that line again and evolve it. And based on our most recent research, those points that we based the easy to love line are still valid, but expanding that beyond sort of the ease, it seems like a very common sense line. It's got everything you love, and that's really the case. It's something for everyone, different demographics, different ages, different travel groups, different types of attractions, everything from outdoor recreation to cities, culture, dining, arts, all the usual things. So we just figured that a line that was more encompassing, kind of building off of the easy to love, made sense. So more to follow on this. Again, launching post Memorial Day. And also, in addition to this year's traditional markets that we're in, the drive markets and the intrastate, we are adding an international component, which is funded by the federal EDA grant that we received post-COVID also. And we'll be in UK and Australia with out-of-home and digital and streaming. And those will be driving more. It's still about awareness and consideration lift, but those campaigns are going to be driving more directly to what Ross mentioned, some of our tour partners. So there's going to be a little bit more lower funnel and hopefully drive some traffic to the actual tour operators. So looking forward to that. So keep an eye on your screens post-COVID. In addition to the TV and broadcast pieces, obviously our summer digital campaign is going to launch. And again, it's hard to sort of encapsulate what we do on digital on one quick slide. It's just this is where the real sort of rubber hits the road, and we have hundreds of targeted messages, new blogs, new content, new social posts, TikTok. The social team just puts out so much content, and it's very targeted. So I don't want to make it sound like we're just putting content out in the world. It's all very thoughtful and targeted, working with the different algorithms and the different optimization opportunities we have across all the social media channels. So again, it's hard to kind of cover that visually here, but you can imagine behind the scenes just hundreds and hundreds of more blogs and targeted posts coming as part of the summer campaign. Actually, the summer digital campaign started running as spring came down. So that's been running since early May and will continue to run through the rest of the season. In addition to the digital campaign, our summer activation tour is going to be launching again this year. It's the same pod tour that we've had out for the past season or two, but this year's tour is going to be one of the biggest ever. Where I think we're hitting, I forgot what the percentage was of more we're on the road. I think we're hitting 33 to 40% more stops than we've hit in the past. This is just some highlights of some of the newer events that we're going through for the first time. You'll see there are a variety of music festivals, food festivals, some are in-state, some are out-of-state. I don't know if it's on here, but Picklesburg, where is Picklesburg? Pittsburgh will be at. Toronto, of note, we're still going to go to Toronto Waterfront Festival. Again, we have not changed our Canadian strategy at all. We're not changing messaging or doing anything knee-jerk. We're also not pulling back. So we continue to talk to our valuable neighbors up north. I'm hoping to get to some of these events. Again, this is not a full list of the tour. These are just some of the first-time events that will be out this year. So we're looking forward to one of the biggest tours that we've ever had, kicking off this Memorial Day weekend at the Jones Beach Air Show. And in addition to our activations and our mobile tour, we've mentioned this, I think, at the last TAC meeting, but I wanted to go into some specifics about some of our ongoing sponsorships. Building on what we've done in the past at the MVP Arena, where we had an I Love New York logo inside their atrium. We've built on that, and it's sort of, we treat our sponsorship somewhere in between the true activation with all of the interactive elements and an out-of-home ad. So we kind of think of our sponsorships almost as out-of-home ads come to life. So these are our activations that don't necessarily have brand ambassadors staffing them, or giveaways or interactive sort of trivia contests that we have at our mobile tour. We have the ability to bring those sort of elements into these when needed or on a relevant event. But for the most part, we've got a permanent presence at some of these arenas. Some of these events are more one-off, like for the Belmont Stakes, we'll be there for the Belmont Stakes itself, which is still in Saratoga for, I believe, I don't know if it's determined yet. It's definitely this year. It may be one more year in Saratoga before it's back in Belmont with the new track there. And we'll also be at Belmont for the Travers a few weeks later in the summer. MVP Arena, like I said, we've been there for a few years with our activation in the atrium there. New this year also, we'll be at SPAC for a handful of events. Not necessarily the Live Nation events, but we'll be at SPAC for some of the SPAC run events. I think the Philadelphia Harmonic and Orchestra, right. We'll be up there for them. And then the one I wanted to point out specifically, we launched earlier this year at the UBS Arena in Belmont, Long Island. This picture doesn't really do it justice, but what we did there was, we worked closely with the UBS Arena team to get us, to put something together that really suited our needs. We didn't want to put something that was just logos and kind of typical announcements. I've said many times that we don't have an awareness problem with the logo. We want to make sure that people understand when they see that logo what it stands for. So we wanted to put something together that obviously told our tourism story, but still provided something fun that people wanted to engage with without having to have brand ambassador staff there full time. So again, you really can't get a full sense of this, but that's a 100-inch TV screen, which is about the size of the screens in this room. And that just runs a constant loop, some of our most beautiful, high-def footage from attractions across the state. It's got a call to action to go to the website, to sign up for our newsletter. But the piece that draws people in is this, large life-size I Love New York sculpture. And the backdrop is, an Islander hockey game with the tagline. Obviously, that line needs to be updated now. But this launched towards the end of hockey season. Ironically, the first night this launched, the Islanders were playing the Edmonton Oilers. So we had a lot of Canadian folks in. And the first few, I would say, dozens of pictures were taken were people with their Edmonton Oilers shirts on, taking pictures in front of I Love New York. So it just shows wherever we put that sculpture, people want to engage with it. And, we're getting some engagement and traction by driving people to by driving people to the newsletter sign up through the QR codes and driving to the website. In addition to that, as part of the same sponsorship package, we've also worked with them to get our logo in front of some of the talent that comes to the arena for concerts and events. The purpose there being, we have a picture of Sebastian Maniscalco backstage at his concert showing off our I Love New York UBS branded pizza box. And the purpose of that is really to get the celebrities to post the picture on their social media so we can then repost and kind of engage in that and take advantage of their followers. So it's fun to have celebrities take pictures with our logo, but there's really, a metric behind it too.
Really a pizza box? Like
Yeah.
Yeah, it's real
pizzerias?
pizza.
Yeah.
It comes with an oven, and they serve in the green
One of the-
room this pizza.
It was one of the benefits that the arena was trying to, the UBS is still a relatively new arena. They're trying to come up with something that they stand for. So when celebrities come through their place, some arenas have like a wall that you sign, or they take a picture in front of a famous icon of that arena. They're trying to get something backstage for their talent. And what they do is offer at the end of a show or a concert, they offer the talent and all the crew pizzas, compliments of UBS and I Love New York. And they're all branded boxes. And there's a little cart backstage for the crew to get I Love New York shirts, hats, things like that. So the UBS team, obviously, they purchased that through our licensed partners. So they're just giving away purchased merch with I Love New York logos on it to the staff and the crew of the event. And they give out the pizza boxes, and they have a little photo op, and sometimes the celebrity will participate and take a picture, post it on social media, and all that is sort of an added value piece of the paid sponsorship that we've been doing with them. So it's our, again, we're kind of slowly progressing on these types of sponsorships. We know from when we've done them in the past, they seem to have been successful. We don't want to just jump into things for, logos and just typical announcements. We're trying to come up with something that is customized to the arena or the event itself that benefits both them and us from a marketing perspective.
So some of our other consumer marketing.
Yep.
Some of our other consumer marketing is obviously our segment tourism programs. Path Through History Spring Weekend is coming up on Father's Day weekend. As of last week, there are already 85 events registered to participate across the state. There will be a paid digital campaign that already launched this month that will run through that weekend in June, and driving visitation to our digital events calendar and the newly launched Path Through History Weekend blog. Digital content is currently displayed in addition at Thruway rest stops and on the I Love New York Welcome Center kiosks. which also drive to the event's calendar. These events range from living history experiences to Juneteenth commemorations, hands-on demonstrations, guided tours, happening, like we said, at scores of historic sites across New York State. We also wanted to mention what I Love New York is doing to support the Erie Canal Bicentennial, which you all know is this year. In addition to some PR trips, which I'll be talking about momentarily, we have produced editorial content and have a dedicated landing page on the I Love New York website with a calendar of canal events throughout the year. We are also planning to develop a video for social media this summer, promoting the many ways to enjoy the canal during the bicentennial, and those plans are in development right now. The Division of Tourism has supported promotion of the anniversary also through a Market New York grant, which was given to the Erie Canalway Heritage Fund. It's kind of the National Park Service promotion of the canal. A marketing campaign that they're doing inspiring visitors to explore the Erie Canal and the Empire State during the bicentennial and America 250. So that's a Market New York grant they got earlier this year. That's Path Through History. Our Accessible New York program. Earlier this month, Sarah and Rhiannon attended the New York, New Jersey Abilities Expo to represent Accessible New York, I Love New York's accessible tourism program. The Abilities Expo is a nationwide convention aimed at helping consumers find accessible resources such as adaptive sports, equipment, and other resources. So it's not specifically a travel expo, but that works well for us, that we can be there and talk specifically about travel. Over 1,000 people visited the booth, which generated email signups and opt-ins for our new Accessible New York e-newsletter, which launches this summer. The booth saw a 41% engagement rate with an average dwell time of over 10 minutes. So it's great to know that people come there and want to spend that much time with you, and shows that this segment is extremely interested in learning about accessible travel opportunities here in New York State. This is the first time Accessible New York has sponsored a live activation, and we're going to be hosting 2 more activations this summer at Disability Pride of Western New York in Buffalo and the Disability Unite Festival in Central Park. And so we'll, of course, update you on those after those occur in our September meeting.
Do you have dog biscuits at them?
Do we have dog biscuits?
You
That
probably should.
She was like the 2024 Service Dog of the Year. She was so cute.
Well, I think it might be because you're going to have service dogs at these.
Yeah.
You might.
No, that's a good idea, actually.
I Love New York
Yeah.
dog biscuits.
Or at least like a
in a
water
bowl.
bowl. Yeah.
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 But I love New York dog biscuits.
That would be cool. I love that idea.
As the year progresses, Accessible New York will be producing another influencer campaign supported. You remember we talked about that from last year. And that'll be supported by a paid advertising campaign, which highlights those influencers' trips and driving consumers to Accessible New York Hub on ilovenewyork.com. So please keep an eye out on I Love New York's Instagram and TikTok for that summer campaign in the coming months. Our Black Travel program is running a summer paid digital campaign, which will promote New York State as a premier summer getaway. So that is in development currently. We're also going to have ads running through targeted advertising on meta platforms like Facebook and Instagram. So you'll be hearing more about that at our next meeting as well. We are now, of course, into Pride season here in New York State. So that's very important for I Love New York LGBTQ. We actually kicked off our first activation for the summer season just this past weekend at Pride in the Sky, or the walkway over the Hudson. That's us there. And I got to attend there and speak and help carry the world's largest transgender pride flag from one end of the walkway, and then a chunk of the original mile-long rainbow flag came from the other side of the walkway, and we met in the middle where the DJ was for a little dance party. It was amazing.
This is the walkway in Poughkeepsie?
Correct. And so that's just one of a number of events we're going to be activating at, including World Pride in DC, New York City Pride, of course, Harlem Pride, and the 10th anniversary of Pride Day at the New York State Fair. So it's a big deal. We'll be promoting Pride-centered content through our LGBTQ email list, our website, organic social media posts, a paid social media and paid search campaign, and a partnership with Passport. You may have heard us talk about in the past, a magazine promoting travel to the LGBTQ community. So those are our segment programs. Our public relations, press relations work on April 10th, which was the actual 100th anniversary of the publishing of The Great Gatsby. MMGY and I Love New York hosted 10 journalists for a full-day tour and overnight stay at Long Island's Gold Coast mansions. Journalists from top-tier publications like Architectural Digest, Afar, National Geographic, and Time were in attendance, and I escorted them along with MMGY. We visited Old Westbury Gardens, the Vanderbilt Museum, and Oheka Castle. Then at Oheka, we hosted a Gatsby-themed dinner that included representatives from vacation regions that have jazz and Gilded Age attractions. So we had reps from the Thousand Islands and reps from the Adirondacks and reps from the Hudson Valley that were able to talk about, Gatsby or Gilded Age themes attractions in their area and create that idea of a theme for the journalists. The FAM trip has already resulted in coverage like a full feature in Town and Country. You could see it there, and a video on Afar's Instagram page. We're actually going to show you that Instagram posting now.
This month marked the 100th anniversary of The Great Gatsby's publication. Here's how to plan the perfect Great Gatsby getaway on Long Island's Gold Coast. Start off your weekend with a trip to Westbury Manor, a Victorian-style mansion with a stunning 200-acre garden and a small cottage that is reminiscent of Nick Carraway's home on the West Egg. Next, head to the Vanderbilt Museum and Planetarium in Centerport. This 43-acre estate is rumored to be one of the real-world inspirations for The Great Gatsby. The party really starts at Oheka Castle, the 20th century mansion that inspired Gatsby's home in the novel. Afterwards, head downstairs to the hotel's restaurant, OHK Bar, for their Great Gatsby happy hour. There, join other hotel guests in your best 1920s getup to grab drinks inspired by the novel.
So that was one of the results of that FAM trip.
This month...
That's right. Also in the PR area, as I mentioned briefly earlier, we are currently in the midst of planning a FAM tour surrounding the Erie Canal Bicentennial, which will take journalists on a journey from Buffalo and Niagara Falls to Lockport, Rochester, Fairport, and Syracuse. MMGY has already secured interest with reporters from Forbes, Good Housekeeping, and National Geographic, and we have another journalist interested in an individual FAM trip in addition to the group FAM that we're doing, focused on the Erie Canal, interested in taking 3 other writers for a journey along the canal in a houseboat that people could actually rent to do kind of camping on the canal. We have plans for several additional FAMs throughout the end of the year, including one focused on America 250 in the fall and a pre-Olympics ski and wellness FAM for winter. Next I wanted to talk about our industry support. The 2025 REDC initiative launched just yesterday, which means that the consolidated funding application, the CFA, which allows you to apply for hundreds of millions of dollars of state funding, is now available. And included in that is $7 million in grants through Market New York, which you hopefully know is the tourism-related grants for marketing and working capital projects. To provide consistency and make a larger pot of funding available for tourism projects, you'll remember there used to be a tourism capital program. So in addition to the $7 million, there was $8 million in Market New York for capital. That has actually now been incorporated into the broader regional council capital funds. So there's not a limit, but up to $8 million is available for tourism-related capital projects. So that's $7 million in Market New York for working capital and marketing, $8 million in the general CFA for tourism, and could be more beyond that as well. Any specifics on that funding, I encourage you to go to ilovenewyork.com/marketnewyork, particularly if you know of anybody that might benefit from these funding programs. Also under industry support, I had the opportunity to go to a number of different industry events. Spring is a really busy time for industry events. We spoke at the annual Manny Conference, the Museum Association of New York in Ithaca. I addressed the museum industry and stakeholders and got to emphasize the importance of participating in the ongoing statewide museum study, which you'll hear about just momentarily from Sarah. At the Manny Conference, they also were able to announce their new executive director, Sarah Van Anden. You'll remember that their prior executive director, or actually not remember, I'm not sure we've talked about it at TAC meeting, but their prior executive director was there for a number of years. She was terrific, has moved on, and they have a new executive director that we're looking forward to working with at Manny. In May, I also gave a presentation at the 2025 Tourism Trends Conference in Poughkeepsie. where our very own Dutchess County TPA held a 10th anniversary celebration, and they used the occasion to announce its rebranding. They are now Destination Dutchess, because they used to be called Dutchess Tourism, and they kept getting calls from people thinking they were a travel agency. So for their 10th anniversary, they did market research, and you can see their new logo there. It's Destination Dutchess. Lastly, for events, I wanted to mention that we were, of course, at the NYS Annual Conference in Canandaigua in April, where Rich and I gave our annual I Love New York update and hosted a TPA meeting. David was with us as well and helped prep us well for all of that. At the conference, former TAC member, you'll remember Valerie Knobloch, was toasted for her contribution to the tourism industry ahead of her retirement from Ontario County TPA. We can't believe she's retiring after 30 years, 40 years. So well-deserved. Sad, but well-deserved. And then lastly, I just want to mention for industry support, the Division of Tourism hosted another industry career fair on May 7th, where we had 28 tourism businesses and 555 job seekers in attendance. Over 50% of the attendees were from New York City or Long Island. And a digital campaign ran for 3 weeks targeting job seekers with an interest in New York State tourism and hospitality. That ad campaign saw 570,000 impressions and over 8,000 clicks on Meta and on LinkedIn, over 88,000 impressions and 900 clicks. So pays to advertise. Originally the division had planned to hold separate job fairs for upstate and downstate like we've done in past years. However, there's actually been low business registration for the downstate fair in particular. So we held just one statewide fair instead. We're seeing that decline compared to when we began the efforts in 2021. We started with 63 employers, then it went down to 55 employers, then 30 employers, and this year was only 28 employers. It's hard to know exactly the cause and effect, but we're noticing, paying attention. The seeker attendance has only declined, but only slightly, so not really very much. So there's actually as many people interested, just about, but not as many people there with the jobs. According to data from the Department of Labor, New York State Department of Labor, current employment rates for hospitality sector remain stable, but they still do lag behind 2019. So there are fewer jobs than there were pre-COVID. We also can't point, with certainty to what may be happening in terms of hiring, given the current environment in hospitality. So anyway, we continue to evaluate the program. Again, we do know that there was good attendance. There was 550 job seekers, and they were seeking hundreds of jobs. So it's not that it's not worth doing, but we're keeping an eye on it to see what happens in the future. That concludes my report.
Great. Thank you, Ross. We thought we would take this time to really kind of learn more about the museum report that Sarah has worked on. So instead of a guest speaker, we wanted to sort of internalize this meeting so that we would also have time to learn about what the findings of that report were, and then also maybe talk about what is on the mind of the TAC members on how we move forward. Sarah.
Thanks so much, Christine. Really excited to be here today to talk about the study. It has been a long time that I've been working on it, and now we're just kind of in the data collection phase that you'll hear a little bit more about from myself as well as our consultant, which is joining us via Zoom today. So the museum study, or kind of how we're marketing it, the New York Study of Public and Private Museums, it's really a comprehensive data collection effort and basically an analysis of all the data that we collect. ESD, or Empire State Development, was directed by statute to be the lead state agency on this effort, with the goal of basically conducting a census of museums in New York State. Believe it or not, which it was a surprise to me, there's really not a fully comprehensive list of all the museums in the state of New York with updated information on hours of operation, staffing, or even really like a best point of contact. We understand and believe that museums are really a pillar of the state's economic, social, and educational fabric, and that includes tourism. But there's a lot that we don't really know about the industry right now. So basically our goal as we set forward, sorry, Rhiannon, if you want to go to the next next slide, is to collect as much information that we can and analyze those findings to basically give elected officials that have asked for the study to happen, state agencies that are working on it, as well as the public at large, more information on the size and scope of the museum community in the state, as well as really outline those resources that museums rely on to succeed. If you want to go to the next slide. So I've mentioned a lot about Empire State Development, but it's really a multi-agency collaboration. We have a work group of stakeholders from the State Education Department, Department of State, State Parks, and the New York State Council on the Arts working on this initiative. They've been involved in this effort from the beginning. They've been super helpful in providing lists of contacts, as well as assisting with that outreach that we're doing right now. And they also help build out the scope of work for the RFP for the consultant that I'll be introducing in a moment. This project has really not been executed at this scale before in the state. And I think it's just because we have such a wide range of museums, like from the Met and the MoMA to like the Jello Museum in Leroy. There's just, I think we need to like set expectations for the information that we really could gather at this level. So for example, we needed to recognize that while the success of the project depends on this wide participation of all the state's museums, their participation is completely voluntary. We knew that we needed this data, but we didn't want to do it without creating too much of an undue burden, especially on those smaller institutions that probably don't have a lot of this information. So if you want to go to the next slide. While the statute was really clear of the intention, they wanted us to collect a bunch of data, they didn't really specifically outline the definition of a museum. So the work group basically had to come to a consensus that the New York State Board of Regents charter process already really identifies what a museum is in the state. So working from that list, that's over 1,500 organizations. That's a lot of places that need to fill out quite an extensive amount of information. And that's not only what we traditionally think of museums, like historic homes and art galleries, but also zoos, aquariums, botanic gardens, and arboretums, and nature centers even too are involved in this. And while the chartered museum lists, it exists, it's not really the type of reference or source of information that we'd need to find out things about like funding or what is the staffing situation at museums. And by having more detail about how museums operate, we can just better inform and build awareness for the initiatives that help museums keep delivering impact in our communities. To talk a little bit more about their work and why, and kind of their approach to the survey and the data collection and reporting is Susie Wilkening, the founder and principal of Wilkening Consulting.
Hi, good morning, everyone. It's so good to be here. Could we move? Yeah, perfect. That's perfect. Before I talk about the New York study of public and private museums, I want to take a moment and I want everyone to think about your favorite museum in New York State. And maybe it's a museum you visited as a child, or it's one down the street from where you live or work. And think about all those different museums in your community, like the Jello Museum or the National Bottle Museum, or maybe it's the Met, and all the art and history, culture, science, and nature that's shared through all those museums in the state, and how all those museums bring people together in your community or bring people to your community. And that really helps make your community unique. We can go on to the next slide. You know, as Sarah just wonderfully said, you have so many museums in New York State. And we took that charter list and we've been adding to it with some of the state sites. And we actually have now a list of more than 2,000 museums. We think more than any other state in the country. That's a lot of museums.
Here's another number one.
Yeah, you're number one. Go to the next slide, please. Now, at Wilkening Consulting, we do a lot of research on the museum field, and we do a lot of audience research. And so we also know that New Yorkers love their museums, and that museums are considered trusted community assets. Just like you're thinking there's probably some really lovely things about the museums in your community and state, so do most New Yorkers. Next slide, please. Museum goers tell us that museums are places that family and friends can spend time together in stimulating and thought-provoking environments. This is why this work matters. Next slide, please. The work of museums builds on the values that most people agree are important, creating a really solid foundation for sharing the experiences of community members. Next slide. And museums also are really cognizant of the responsibilities that they have to our communities. There's preservation of collections, which is one of those key parts of that statute. Education of adults and children, that K through 12 education is also important. Artistic expression, and truth-telling being really key obligations. Next slide, please. What we're also hearing from the public in our broader work is that they count on museums to share original objects, those things, those documents, to tell the truth through those things, and to encourage all visitors to consider evidence fairly and with an open mind. Next slide, please. Now, we all know we're in pretty uncertain times. I know you've been talking about that a little bit as I've been listening in. But what's really interesting right now in this very uncertain time is that museums and public libraries are trusted more than ever. As trust has declined over the past few months and years for so many institutions, it's actually increasing for museums and public libraries. And what's so great is that the state of New York is really recognizing this vital role of museums and communities. Next slide, please. So Wilkening Consulting, my firm, that we work with the museum field primarily, and we're thrilled to be bringing our work as leading museum data and audience researchers to this project. We've been doing this kind of work as a firm for nearly 10 years. We're best known for fielding what's called the annual survey of museum goers, working with hundreds of museums across the country every year and over 100,000 museum goers every year to learn about what's the role of museums in American society. But we also conduct studies of museums themselves, such as the Connecticut Cultural Census, which we've done for Connecticut Humanities Council. We've done work for the Association of Academic Museums and Galleries, and we also field studies on behalf of the American Alliance of Museums. So we've done quite a bit of this work, but this is really comprehensive and large-scale work here on behalf of the state of New York. Next slide, please. So as Sarah mentioned, it is a sort of census of all chartered museums in the state, and we're working with a number of these different state agencies to really kind of wrap our arms around what's going on in the state of New York. Next slide, please. So we want to understand if museums have enough funding and support to do that critical work that they do. We want to be able to enable informed decision-making when it comes to what those museums need, and to build support for initiatives that aim to keep New York museums open, accessible, and delivering impact in all those communities across the state. Next slide, please. As Sarah mentioned, it's a survey for all chartered and state-operated museums in New York. And so that ends up being a lot of different museums across the state. And so we've created this very robust survey instrument so we can gather that information from all these different types of museums, whether they have living collections, such as zoos and botanical gardens, or whether it's that more traditional museum of specimens or documents and objects. Next slide, please. We're listening really hard to what New York policymakers wish that they knew about museums, so we can make sure we have that data. Next slide, please. And by putting all this data together, we're going to really wrap our arms around the scope and size of the museum field in the state. This includes museums by type, employment, attendance, K through 12 education, collections, and more. We also want to understand what kinds of challenges and constraints museums are facing as they fulfill their missions. Policymakers want to make sure resources are allocated in ways that are effective for supporting this field and thus supporting the communities throughout the state. Next slide, please. So we have a very short timeline to get this work done. So any encouragement you can give to your local museums to contribute their data is deeply appreciated. Right now, we are in the field actively collecting information from museums, and we have a wonderful data team who is out there doing grassroots recruitment of information from these museums. We're aiming to call every single museum in the state if we haven't heard from them. We have a lot of outreach happening. This is going to be going on through the summer. Data analysis will be happening in the fall, and then developing and reporting results to the state as early as late fall and into the early winter. Next slide, please. And the leaders of our outreach team, Zach and Noel, are really excited to help museums with anything they need to help complete their data collection. And they are standing by. They are ready to help because you have fantastic museums in New York State. And this research will help the state support them better and your communities more effectively. Thank you so much.
So you guys can see why we chose them and decided to work with them. They do a really great job. I think, you know, one of the biggest things too was just like taking the time to understand for the smaller institutions, a lot of them are going to need kind of that like grassroots help. It's not as simple as just saying surveys open, you know, and fill it out at your leisure. It's like, no, people are probably going to have to be walked through on a lot of these things. A lot of how they're getting information about operating budgets and revenues. That's really tricky for some folks to kind of get together. So as Susie mentioned, it's open now. We're really asking for help with getting the word out there. If you want to go to the next slide, Wilkening's done a really great job at creating an online hub for all of the information about the study. So if you go to the website, which I'll provide a link to in a moment, it includes the study itself, but it also has downloadable PDFs for the version of the questions. It'll save your place, you know, for where you are. And it's like, oh, I don't have that information, but I can come back to it. They give you reminders, email reminders to fill it out. There's also resources like a user guide, a data spreadsheet that really helps the respondents with those financial questions, like I just mentioned. And we knew that for a lot of museums, their time and staff are very limited, which is why, as Susie mentioned, hiring those field workers, having Zach and Noel on hand to really walk people through has been really useful and has helped with the outcome of getting more organizations to fill it out. So we launched in April. In less than 2 months, we have almost 250 organizations that have already either completed or partially filled out the survey. And we're seeing responses come in on a regular basis. We just recently got one of the big ones. The Met just completed the survey, which was great. And we got a variety of really great responses so far, but that's only 250. As you saw, we have almost 2,000 folks that we really need this information. And it's something that they've asked for. You know, I think it's probably the case some folks maybe don't know about it. They don't know how to access it. So if you want to just go to the next slide, that's the QR code and the website address to access the survey, access all of the information that I just talked about. And please share with your partners in the cultural institutions and museums field if you can. That's all for us.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've got several questions. First of all, will it culminate in a guide for the public as well?
Not a guide. This is a data collection process. So this is, the legislature really just wants information. It will be a report that's available to the public.
Right, but do you think anyone will use it to create a guide? Maybe like, say, I Love New York.
Yeah, I was just going to say the really great thing, and Susie can probably speak to it a little bit too. If you look at the work that they've previously done and some of the things that they've put together kind of like snippets of the data. So it's like 50% of museums utilize public resources for funding and things like that. And it's kind of like an advocacy spreadsheet for museums to kind of like take around and be able to say like, hey, museums are really important. You know, this is why, this is all the data that was just collected. Susie, correct me if I'm.
Sure. One of the things that we'll be creating are infographic data stories about the findings that museums can use to talk about museums more effectively. This is our impact on New York State, or even this is our impact in our region, or this is what, looking and comparing what's typical for a museum of our type and size, and might be using that for planning purposes. So this is really looking at it from a field perspective. That said, if I'm understanding the question correctly, at the end of this project, there will be a database, an up-to-date database of New York State museums that we will be handing over to Empire State Development. And then Empire State Development will have that database to do with as you will. I don't know that y'all are going to be publicizing that database, but that's up to your discretion.
Now, so on that same vein, will you be including museums in this that are in planning stages, or only ones that have already been chartered?
Either chartered or have applied for a charter, I believe.
Okay.
Right?
And
Chartered or state operated, because historic sites are not technically chartered.
okay. And then are you using social media to promote the, okay. And then lastly, for those that are seasonal, like botanical gardens, or at least smaller ones and whatnot, the dates that you've got for the survey might prove difficult in terms of getting that done, because that's their busiest season.
I mean, my hope is that through calling through to a lot of places, we can kind of get, what would be useful or what would be helpful to get that information from them. It's not a hard deadline of the end of July. Obviously, the more data that we get, the better the report will be at the end of this. But we're looking and seeing what comes in and the conversations that are.
I think it's a wonderful project.
I mean, you've definitely, identified a real challenge, the seasonality, because it's sort of, you could do it at different times of year, and there literally is nobody there to do the survey, because there are lots of places that are only
Well, I mean,
open.
getting the information out there now, but having a deadline that might be a little later, but ends right after the summer ends, might be a little bit more reasonable for some organizations when they're winding down operations, when they have time to do paperwork.
Yeah, well, like Sarah said, we'll take a look. I mean, I certainly think if anyone reached out to us and said, we can't do it until August, we're not going to say, well, no, you're out, right? The idea is at some point, you have to take the data you have, start analyzing it and creating the report from it. That process will probably start August, September, that kind of thing. But there's nothing to say that there can't be some fungibility.
And the good news is one of the questions we ask at the very end of the survey is, how long did it take you to gather the data and complete this data collection? And the average museum is saying less than an hour.
Oh, well, that's good.
That's good. That's incredible.
Yeah. Randy?
First of all, I'd like to.
Oh, Randy.
Oh, yes, sorry. I'm green. First of all, I'd like to commend you for taking on this incredibly important project. This is going to be information that will be very valuable to people in state government, but and in a lot of areas of New York State life, public and life, and so I think it's really, really great that you're doing that. I myself had a career doing somewhat comparable research over decades. I did an economic study of New York State, the study of the economic impact of the arts of New York State, probably 30 years ago. I'd have to try and dig it up. But as far as I know, the only time it's ever been done. But I do have a question. What exactly do you mean by distinguishing between public and private museums?
That's a good question. Susie, do you want to take that one? You're probably.
Sure. The way I'm interpreting it is a public museum is one that's owned by a government entity, so federal, state, local. And a private museum, in this case, is going to be a private 501c3 organization. But we are not including for-profit museums in this study.
Yeah. I think that virtually all museums are 501c3s.
Most. Mm-hmm.
It's it's not well known or understood that, especially in the city of New York, that there, there's a whole roster of cultural institutions, museums, and others. And I like the fact that you've got a lot of others in your definition of the eligible institutions you're studying. But it's not quite well understood that there are a lot of cultural institutions in New York City that are owned by the city, but seem to everyone who walks in the door to be completely private. Head of the list, Metropolitan Museum of Art. It's owned by the city. It's on city land that you're somewhat familiar with, Little Park. And the city gives it about 40% of its operating budget. There's no sign on the wall when you walk in anymore. I made them put a sign up once, but they took it off. That lets people know that yes, this is not as unlike, say, Paris as you might think, because all the bronze plaques thanking Mrs. So-and-so who lives across the street on Fifth Avenue gives you an idea that this is a totally private institution. It is entirely private in terms of its operation, which is a blessing, because then it's comparable to a university or a hospital. It's highly professional, but it's also extremely public, and that's a kind of wonderful reality that I'm sure is spread across the state. And so it'd be interesting to see how that can be reflected in the way you present the data that you're now collecting when it's finally all together and analyzed and so forth. Because I think it's a healthy and good thing for people in the state of New York to know that just as there are large numbers of generous philanthropic people, corporations, foundations, everything, paying for this kind of thing, there's also a tremendous amount of support from local communities, local governments, and so forth, as well as from the state. And I know you've got, I've noticed, of course, you've got NYSCA and stuff like that there.
Yeah.
It's a very complicated story.
Yeah, and I think, that's why there's so much questions about the funding sources. And that's why, for example, that data spreadsheet, like for people to actually, small organizations, on one hand, it's harder because they're not experts at it, but it's easier because they don't have as many. But, to actually go through and say, well, what are your funding sources and what percentage is from donations and what percentage is from ticket sales and what percentage is from public funding and what percentage is foundations. Those are the sorts of data we're trying to get.
And from tourists.
Might I say something? Excuse me, Barbara Lee here. Might I say something?
Yeah, of course.
Is that Barbara Lee?
I think, yes, it is. As you might recall, I came to New York City as the first director of cultural affairs and ended up in various roles at NYSCA, including being its chair. So I have some familiarity with the important study that you're undertaking. And while I'm sorry, I don't know who the last speaker was, while he is accurate, but I think the nuance might be a little bit off base. The land is owned by the city of New York. The buildings and the collections are private. And the city of New York, meaning the Department of Cultural Affairs, actually that never had a line till the end of my first tenure, gives X amount of money to that museum and many other institutions that request it. But what is so remarkable is, frankly, the generosity of residents and visitors to so many of these institutions. And I think it would be a good idea to remind the visiting public that they have a stake too. Even if you give as much as you care to, you have contributed to the future and the well-being of that institution. I think everybody should be seen as a partner, and they are not governmentally owned.
Thank you, Barbara Lee. Yeah, that's one of the things I was mentioning is that seeing those sources of funding, one of which is the people who just come to visit, and the donations and the philanthropists
No, but I think it's good to include them, that they're because the option is very frequently give whatever you like on certain days. And I think that nuance is important to make these great institutions, and most of them are, available to the widest possible public. And we know that culture is no longer a priority, the priority rank. I think it has been for more than a decade replaced by a very significant role of healthcare. And that, if what is going on at this very moment in Washington occurs, will become even more prominent. That does not diminish the role of the broad swath of culture. And who starts these institutions? I mean, there are various stories. Was Radio City unique at the time? Was it a cultural institution or part, and a very clever part, of a real estate development? I could point out a dozen such similarities, but I don't want to diminish their ongoing role. But I think you really have to think of the complexity of New York real estate and New York culture. And considering the fact, now you'll hear my chauvinism, that New York City is the largest city in the state and larger than 39 states, I would commend our efforts to focus. If Pittsburgh is steel, New York is culture and finance. And I think this initiative is very important, but as you all know very well, and I hope appreciate and enjoy, culture in New York is not only the visual arts, but the performing arts, the literary arts, music. Those are the reasons that so many of our tourists come and return and return. Sorry for my speechless.
No, it was very good to hear that, Barbara Lee, and we value your input and we appreciate the time and years that you've put into this. So you've got this institutional knowledge, and it's why you are at the table, although not quite at this table, but you're with us, and we're very grateful for that.
Well, you're very kind, but I just wanted to say how important this initiative is, and I hope it gets broader, that, you know, that we promote more and more culture.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that is hopefully, I don't know much about this because I'm learning as well, but I'm hoping that that is the purpose of the study, so that it could give people the tools that they need in order to advocate for the museum industry. So that being said, I'm wondering how you're tapping into and working with Manny, the Museum Association of New York, because they identify of having 1,400 museum members. So it seems like that legwork is already done, and I just hope we're not reinventing the wheel and wasting time and energy and resources.
Well, I'm hoping that that's very well put. And there is, of course, great pride in most institutions, and for good reason. But I do think that we should talk about those assets as much as we talk about our wonderful skiing and, you know, things of that sort.
Yeah.
Particularly when there are so many threats to the tourist population right now.
Yeah. And speaking to Manny, we have been working with them very closely. Erica Sanger was actually, I think, pretty vital in the crafting of the legislation that became statute. And so this is an initiative they really wanted to happen. you know, they have limited ability to do on their own, especially with the staff turnover that they recently had. We're so glad that they now just named Sarah as their new executive director, and we're excited to work with her. But Wilkening has been great in attending the Manny conference that was just this past April. They had a whole session on how to participate. Yeah, so Manny's been an incredible partner, and I don't know how we would do it without them. Yeah.
Right, she went through the process, but one of the pre-steps, or one of the first steps, was compiling a starting point of the list. So it wasn't just go with the outreach, it's compiling with the Manny's and all the other associations to get a good starting point, so you know you're going after this targeted list, which was a big lift to begin with.
Yeah. I think David.
Yeah, I think David had a question.
David.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question. I'm having a hard time hearing you guys. I think you switched microphones.
Okay. Can you hear me okay, David? You're next.
A little bit better. Yeah. Sarah and Susie, thank you for compiling such a huge list. I've, as some of you might know, I've been in the museum space for, goodness, about 15 years or so before I switched over. And I understand you have to start somewhere. So clearly the public and private nonprofit museums is a good place to start. But over the last few years, there has been an increase in for-profit museums, as well as what the consumer, the museum goer, views as a museum. They do not delineate between 501c3s and for-profit museums. They just want the cultural experience or the museum experience. And having worked for a for-profit museum for a few years, we see for-profit museums see themselves as part of this spectrum of museum options and fulfills a very specific museum goer's need. So certainly not this first stage, but I certainly wouldn't recommend from a view of tourism to just cut off for-profit museums at some point, because they are driving tourism. They do attract tourists, maybe even more than the regular non-tourist museum goer.
And I mean, it is my understanding that there are some for-profit museums that are chartered.
Yeah, because I think, and Susie, correct me if I'm wrong, and if I am wrong, we may want to take a look at that. The distinction was chartered or not chartered, not so much the for-profit or non-profit. So, for example, the example I always use, Madame Tussauds doesn't even call itself a museum because it's not chartered, and it would be illegal in New York State for them to call themselves a museum. But a for-profit museum that is chartered should be included in the study, I think. So, but we'll take a look at that.
Yeah. And then also figure out, you're using charter now as the delineation. And as you know, there are some attractions that use the word museum loosely but then there are some for-profit non-chartered that really act as and serve as a museum.
And to be clear, everything we're talking about here is for the purposes of this study, not for the purposes of I Love New York tourism promotion.
Right.
So those are two different things.
So, but I think what I'm hearing, though, this question is, what about visiting temporary exhibits that may not be chartered, may not even be part of a museum, but like whether it's the Titanic or the Van Gogh immersive experience.
Exactly.
Obviously, that is not a museum, but it is bringing in visitors, people to go, and there's a lot of money that is exchanging because
And it's for
for
profit.
art. Yeah, it's for profit, but it's for the purpose of experiencing art. So how do you deal with that?
So,
And it's not chartered.
right. Well, but so it's the legislature that mandated us to do this study.
Okay.
Right. And what the legislature first and foremost wants to know is, how can New York State support museums?
Okay.
Right.
Brick and
So
mortar.
the main
The brick and
thing they're
mortars,
first
right.
and foremost concerned with is chartered museums, because at the end of the day, that's what taxpayer dollars are going to support. That's what private foundations are going to support, et cetera, et cetera. Now, we have been an important voice from the beginning, I do think, of saying, but museums are many things. They're not only educational institutions, they are important tourism drivers. I will say we are drawing a distinction between museums and just general culture and arts and other things. This study, the sponsor of it was very particular and very specific, is about museums. It's not about any other artistic or cultural experience. That might be another study, but this is literally for museums.
Okay.
Understood. Thank you, Ross.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
thank you.
thank you, Sarah, and thank you very much, Susie, for joining us. And keep us posted on the progress. I'm realizing the time is approaching, and we didn't really get a chance to discuss sort of open business, and also with the 250 upon us, believe it or not. It's mostly taking place 250 years ago. The Revolutionary War is still in Massachusetts, and they're still fighting and skirmishing, but they're moving south. There's a lot going on. So here's what I will do in an effort to sort of brief you quickly. I am on the commission. We have these meetings, which used to be twice a year, now quarterly, and I think they're going to start moving into monthly or, as we need them. The next one is on Tuesday, June 3rd. So I do want to invite you all. It is a public meeting. So it goes from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. and it's at the Queen's. I know. It's probably actually more like 3, but I have it. But so anyway, the Queen's Public Library at Flushing. So we might be able to send this information to you. But and I don't know what the agenda is just yet, but I do know that we're going to have we had a couple of speakers, one being PBS to talk about Ken Burns' documentary, which before Ken Burns, when he was doing this on his own, New York approached him to explain the role that New York played in the Revolutionary, and he has now included a great segment of New York's role. So he's going to be going and announcing this or launching the documentary with the governor. There's going to be an airing in Albany. He'll be doing 2 in September, I believe. It opens in November to the general public, but he's going to start seeing it. So we'll keep you posted on that. So if you'd like to come to the 250, it's June 2nd. And then our next meeting, and I'm just reminding you that it is going to be in Rochester at the Strong National Museum of Play. So there you go. Maybe, Sarah, you'll even have an update for us by then. So that's going to be on September 9th. Hopefully you can come in person, but of course we will make it available to you by Zoom.
But you're missing out if you don't come in person. You're going to miss the butterfly aviary and the pinball arcade. And you have no idea. The Strong's amazing.
Yeah.
2 weeks ago, and it was my first visit there. It was great.
Yeah.
I want to spend more time.
Well, you'll be back in September.
Everyone says.
So before I adjourn, information on the table from members that we need to address or that you want to add for the record? No? Okay. Okay. All righty. Well, you can always email us. So I will now need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay. I'll need a second.
Second.
Okay. I think that was
Barbara Lee.
Barbara Lee, thank you so much. Okay, so the meeting is now adjourned at 12:33. I appreciate your 3 minutes of extra time to spend on TAC, and wishing you all a fantastic summer. Best of luck to the ESD team who's going to be out there on our behalf the entire summer, and hopefully we'll see you also at the State Fair, which is very exciting. So
Stay hydrated.
stay hydrated with craft beer and water. Great.
Fried Oreos.
Thank you so much.
Good night. Bye.
The dates of the state fair.